Welcome to the folks who have already joined. We're going to get started in just a moment. I can just see many of your fellow students are joining as well. We'll get started in about a minute or so. Welcome to folks who have already joined. We're just going to wait just a minute because I can see that our numbers are still climbing for other new students who are joining. So we will be started in about a minute or two. Hello, and welcome to Start on Campus University Classroom. I'm Andrea, a part of the START team who are helping you prepare this summer for starting in fall 2021, and I use she, her pronouns. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. The University of Guelph resides on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. It is recognized that the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples have long-standing and ongoing relationships with this land. This is a gathering place where we work and learn and is home to many past, present, and future First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. It is important to recognize the lands of Indigenous peoples locally across Turtle Island and around the world. We acknowledge the land because we have a collective responsibility to this place and its people's histories, rights, and presence. We are so excited to welcome you to Start on Campus because we are so excited to welcome you to the Griffin community. Today we have many folks joining us from campus to talk to you about the university classroom, including Prof. Howells, one of our faculty, Zhao from Information Security, Joanna from the library, Victoria and Carolyn from Open Ed, and upper year students too. You're welcome to ask any questions on your mind in the Q&A chat live, including starting now. You don't have to wait at all. And if you have any questions this summer and don't know who to ask, email us at start@uguelph.ca. I'm really excited in particular to talk to you about the university classroom today with all these folks from across campus because O Week is only a few weeks away, which means your classes are only a few weeks away. I'm so excited to be back on campus and have an on-campus experience with you. And first, I want to hand it off to Joanna from the library, who's going to chat with us about what a university classroom looks like.
Okay, hi everyone. As Andrea said, my name is Joanna and I work in the library on campus. And so We're so excited to be seeing you soon. And I'm going to start off our session today with actually some photos of some university classrooms. And we're going to I'll talk a little bit about what it's like to be in those classrooms, some things to help you think about in terms of preparing. And then I'm going to pass it over to some other folks. So bear with me while I share my screen. Oh, and by the way, I use the pronouns she, her. Okay. So I thought we'd start off with a big campus classroom. This is one of the larger ones in Rosansky Hall. We recognize it's been a while since you might have been in in-person classroom. This is one of the larger ones. This is a classroom in Alexander Hall. Like the other one that I showed, it's a lecture style. The first photograph would fit about 400 students, and this lecture hall fits about 150 or so. Then the third slide is a different classroom. This classroom uses modular seating. If you look at the chairs, you can see that they all are on wheels, so you can wheel them around. There are some screens overhead, so this is more of an interactive type of classroom. And then finally, I wanted to show you a smaller classroom. So if you are in seminars where you'll be doing some discussion, your classroom might look like this one. It seats comfortably about 30 people. This is a classroom in our McKinnon building. And while in the photograph, it's arranged so that all of the chairs are facing the front, these classrooms can be easily moved around so that students can face each other when they're having conversations. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And go back. So just wanted to start with that, since we are talking about university classrooms, and that'll give you an idea of what they're like. A few common questions that people have asked, I'll start in with answering. One of the questions people have said to me sometimes is, will I have enough time to get from one class to another? If you haven't been on campus yet, one of the great things about the University of Guelph campus is that most classrooms are really close to each other. So there are 10 minutes between classes, and for the most part, students find you can move from one classroom to another. If you are in a classroom that's one of the larger classrooms, sometimes you have to allow a little extra time to get into the classroom and to exit it. And that can actually take time that sometimes people didn't plan on. But usually we find that you can take classes back to back, and that's not a problem. A couple other things that I wanted to touch on before we move to the next speaker is I wanted to say a little bit about something called course outlines, which I think Prof. Howells might talk more about. But a course outline is also called a syllabus. I'm sure many of you had those in high school. Essentially, it's a contract between you and your professor, and it goes over really important dates. Timelines, it's essentially saying this is what the class is about. So she will be talking about this a little bit more in her section. Another thing that I wanted to mention, which also comes up in terms of her frequently asked question, is, okay, how do I prepare for lecture? One of the things that we say is just very simply, be ready for the first day. We're going to be talking soon about something called CourseLink, which is like the Google Classrooms of the University of Guelph. It's going to give you lots of information about how to prepare for class. So just make sure you've got all the normal things you would have. A laptop, if you're going to need textbooks, you'll hear about that. And what other supplies that you need. So you come to class. We do realize for a lot of you, it's been a long time, maybe since you've been in a room with lots of other people. So just be prepared for the fact that there might be some distractions. That's okay. That's normal. That's part of the learning experience. You can do some really simple things like try to sit in the front of the classroom, be a good citizen yourself. And when you're using your laptop, don't turn on things that will distract you from the lecture. Just have one tab open where you're perhaps taking your notes. And that's it. And otherwise, focus on the instructor. So I'm just touching on a few key things right this minute, but we're going to pass it over, and a lot of these things now are going to be discussed in more details by some others. So I'm going to mute myself, and it's off to the next person.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joanna. We're going to hand it off to Carolyn from Open Ed, who's going to chat a little bit more about what the difference between a seminar, lab, lectures are like, and what that looks like. Thank you so much for touching a little bit on what some actual physical in-person classes or classrooms look like at U of G. I always love seeing photos because I feel like that's really helpful for folks watching to know what that actually looks like in reality. Okay, off to you, Carolyn.
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, my name is Carolyn Creighton, and I'm an instructional technology specialist over in Open Ed, and I use the pronouns she, her. So as you prepare for your classes for the fall semester, you may find that you have courses and labs and seminars that are all offered in some really different formats. So thinking back to your high school experiences and before that, likely you had courses in person, and certainly we know there are going to be lots of courses running in person on campus for the fall. And there will also be courses running online. So some of these courses will be what we would consider remote delivery, where you're going to be on something like Teams or Zoom. And then there's also courses called distance education courses. And actually my colleague Victoria is going to be talking more about those in a little bit. In between that face-to-face and online course, you may find you have some courses that are running in a hybrid model. And there's lots of different words you might hear thrown around: hybrid, high flex, blended. They're all very similar, and what you need to know is what it means really for you as a student, as some students might be face-to-face in person in the classroom, and some students might be learning remotely online via Teams or Zoom, all happening within the same class. You'll be getting more information from your professors and other instructors about the format of your course, and a lot of that information will also be in CourseLink, which I'll be coming back to talk a little bit more about later. I think at this point, I'm going to throw it over to some of our upper year students who are here with us today, because they can share examples of their experiences as students. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sammy. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm on the orientation team. So I just recently graduated from criminal justice and public policy. Although I graduated already, another friend of mine is also in criminal justice and public policy and will be going back into their final year next year in September. So to give a little bit of an example, our program doesn't have any labs to attend, which means that this year for their courses, they'll have a mix of online and in-person components. So for example, they'll have 2 lectures out that are in person, and then 1 course with an online lecture with asynchronous times, which means that they have to attend at a specific time and complete the course work on time, but has an in-person seminar once a week.
Awesome, thanks so much, Sammy. And I know that we want to hear from Victoria next from Open Ed, who wants to chat a little bit about distance ed.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Hi, everyone. So while we're talking about what a university classroom looks like and what kind of classes you might be signing up for, I wanted to take a moment to talk with you about the online classroom. And as my colleague Carolyn was just letting you know, distance education, DE courses is the acronym you'll see, are fully online courses. So these are different from the different hybrid models you may have experienced over the past year. And we really wanted you to know that it's important to not collapse our DE fully online courses with some of the online experiences you may have had, because they're quite different. So DE courses at the University of Guelph are fully online. Most are asynchronous, meaning you don't have to be online at a particular day and time. You won't have a lecture. You'll be able to learn flexibly according to your own schedule, which can be really helpful if you're doing things like juggling part-time work in addition to your studies, or if you have other extracurriculars, athletics, or just family responsibilities and things like that. DE is a really nice flexible option for you. But we do want to stress, in case you're wary of online learning after a year where it's maybe gotten a bit of a bad rap, that DE courses at Guelph are really high quality. They are very professional looking. They are designed with an instructor who is the subject matter expert in consultation with an instructional designer and a whole team of people, including graphic designers, professional programmers, also that you end up with a comprehensive and supportive learning environment online that's interactive, modern, and really engaging. So there are a lot of benefits to DE, and if you think it might be something you're interested in, I'd love to talk to you more about it. I'll be presenting a session on Thursday where a colleague and I will share some more about what you can expect from DE courses and how to set yourself up to succeed as a DE student. So we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. And I just want to transfer over. We're going to chat with a professor next, because many new students are curious about professors, what they're like, what a university classroom is like with professors. So we have a real live professor here to answer common questions live with us. And I'll let Prof. Howell just introduce themselves a little bit further than me just sharing their name. And I'm sure you want to share what faculty you're from and a little bit more than that.
Hi, thanks, Andrea. I am Prof. Howell. I teach in I use the she, her pronouns. I'm from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, but I teach in the Criminal Justice and Public Policy program. So that's a lot to throw at you, but if you are in CJPP, you will probably end up having me for one of your courses, because I teach SOC 1500 and SOC 2700. And I did introduce myself as Prof. Howell. You may have noticed that, because one of the biggest things that I always tell students is to err on the side of politeness with your professors. Most of us will want you to call us professor or doctor. Some of your instructors may not have a doctorate, and you may not know that, and you may not even know what I'm saying right now. So I go into it always thinking, just call them Professor so-and-so, right? They're not going to get mad at you for that, but some of them might get mad at you if you call them hey you or call them by their first name. And the syllabus, or the course outline that Joanna was talking about earlier, will almost always tell you exactly what you should call them. Now, if you go to the Student Experience Instagram Live tomorrow, which I'm sure Andrea will tell you about at some point, you will run into an instructor from a different program who insists you call him Orbex, and that's great. But he made that call. So that's what I want the takeaway to be. Call your professors what they tell you to call them.
I love this. Shall we jump into some of the questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. I love it. Okay. So I feel like you answered one of the most popular ones, which is, what do I call my professors? And yes, we are totally having a Student Experience Instagram Live tomorrow. You are absolutely on it, Prof. Howells. I love it. But we have some other questions here. And so I'm just going to jump between some of them, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So one of the first ones we have is, what if I have a question for you? So for example, what if you have a question for a professor? Not much context given here, but just what if you have a question?
Well, there's lots of different points of contact. And so I think the first thing is ask the question. If you have a question, we want to know. A lot of times we realize after that we haven't explained something clearly, or we could go over it or add some more research study tips for you. You can ask your teaching assistant if you have one. They will often be listed on your course outline. You can reach out to us. And I'll preempt one of your other questions, Andrea, and say that you can come to office hours. On that syllabus or outline, I use the terms interchangeably, and so will your other instructors. It'll always tell you our office hours, how to reach us, where typically we're sitting in an office. Some of us may still be having them over Zoom or Teams. They should really be called student hours, because the whole point of having them is that's a dedicated time where we're in our office, or I'm actually in a closet right now, but wherever we are, we're waiting for you, the students, to come and talk to us. Bring us your questions. They can be about course material. They can be something from the lecture, the textbook. It can also just be about university life. A lot of navigating university is new for people, and a lot of us, like me, are first generation university students. I didn't have parents who went to university or siblings who went to university who could tell me these things. And it's okay if you're in that position too. Come talk to us about anything. We really like to get to know you too. So that's a really good way of getting those questions answered.
I love that. And yeah, you definitely answered quite a few other questions that I have right off the bat. One of them that I want to follow up on a little bit is around why you might think it's important to get to know your professors. So you're mentioning that a lot of professors are approachable and that they have office hours and you can get to know them and chat with them and etc. But are there any particular reasons why you think it's important to get to know your professors?
Absolutely. A lot of students, I think more so now than say 10 years ago, a lot of students already know they want to go on to graduate school or law school or teachers college. And most of those places require reference letters. Now, a lot of the classes you're going to be in are huge. Those pictures that Joanna was showing you, they hold 400 to 600 students. And so somebody like me who teaches regularly 600 students in one class, I won't know all your names. I will know a lot of you, but not everyone. If you're coming to office hours, if you're asking questions, then by the time you need things like a reference letter, we're able to say, yes, absolutely, I can write on your behalf. I know you. If I've never seen you other than the time you're asking me for a letter, I can't say anything about you, and it's not actually in your best interests to have me write that letter. There are also opportunities that come up. I currently have some undergraduate research assistants, and they are all students that I got to know in first year because they would come to office hours, ask me questions, we would chat, and I would think of them when I was looking for somebody to help out on a research project I'm working on. So lots of good reasons to get to know your prof. Plus, most of us really want to get to know you as well. That's the thing I miss most about this past year is I don't get to just see you while I'm grabbing a coffee and we have that conversation. So we're all looking forward to getting back to that.
I love that. And those are really all very tangible reasons why it's important to get to know your professors. I know you mentioned that you're a first generation student. I'm also a first generation student, and no one really told me how important it was to get to know your professors or why it was important to get to know your professors. And I kind of figured it out by the time I was in third and fourth year, but I really missed out on a lot of opportunities because I didn't put myself out there my first year and get to know my professors right off the bat. And so I had a challenge for myself because I was a little bit shy. Believe it or not, I was a little bit shy when I first went to university. And it was just to introduce myself to one professor just because I was shy and make sure that I put myself out there to meet like friends and peers as well. And that first professor that I introduced myself was actually someone who really influenced the rest of my course choices just by getting to know them. So yes, thumbs up, really important to introduce yourself to your professors, get to know them during office hours. And you also mentioned something else, and I'm wondering if you can follow up on that too. You mentioned the word TA. Can you share a little bit more about what a TA is?
Absolutely. So we have in sociology and anthropology and criminal justice and public policy, we have graduate students who are TAs. In other programs, they may be undergraduate students who are working as TAs. And these are teaching assistants. So it depends on the program and the course what they will do. So I'll talk specifically about in my courses, they are the individuals who are grading all of your papers. I'm good, but I can't grade all 600 of your essays. It's just not feasible. And so we distribute the grading and I'll grade a chunk of them, but the TAs will be the ones who are doing the really in-depth commenting on all of your papers or other assignments. They're also a great place to go for questions to their office hours, that because they're graduate students, they can tell you what grad school is, something I didn't even know till I was in my fourth year. And so you can ask them questions as well. They are typically really well versed in the subject matter. Often they're people who have also taken the course or a similar course at a different university, so they can help you really understand what you're doing. And if you are a bit nervous to talk to your professor, we try to be approachable, but some may be more than others. The TA is a great first kind of person to go to. They also might be quicker to respond to emails because they will have a sort of a chunk of students assigned to them, not the entire class of 600.
I love that. And you started talking a little bit about sizes of classes and what a classroom looks like, which I feel is a really good build off of what Joanna and Carolyn and Sammy were talking about. So I'm wondering if we can pivot into some classroom questions. And specifically, I have a couple about that are very related to engaging with your prof too. But the first one is, how do I prepare for a university class? What does that look like?
Absolutely, and I've had a few keen students reach out already asking about my class, which I love. It just shows how motivated you are to be here. At this point, there's not too much to prepare. You don't have your syllabus or course outline, course link isn't open, but those are the first two things you should do. So on September 9th, I want to say it's noon, it could be slightly earlier, but course link will open and you'll see a little icon. That's not my area for each of your classes. And typically the course syllabus will be posted right away. So for my class, you can click on it. This is like your Google Classroom, right? And you'll see exactly what's expected of you. And that's the biggest piece of advice I can give. Read the syllabus for every single one of your classes. Print it off, keep it on your homepage, sleep with it, whatever works for you, but you're going to need to look at it more than once. There's a lot of like dry university policies we have to put in, but you're expected to know them. So make sure you've read them. But there's also really important information about how each particular class will run, when your assignments are due, how to contact those TAs and your professor, what you're supposed to read each week. It's all there for you. And we spend literally most of our summers working on putting them together. It's not something that we just do the night before. And you shouldn't do that either with any of your assignments. But the syllabus is so important and so different for each class. Just because you've read one doesn't mean you shouldn't read the others. You need to read all of them. Those are the best ways I think that you can prepare. And Carolyn has let me know that most course sites open September 9th at midnight. So the first thing when you wake up September 9th, you will be able to see what's going on in each of your courses.
I love that. Thank you so much. And you're mentioning something that's also making me think of a very common like first year student question that comes up within like the first 1 or 2 weeks of class. And it's what I should do before my class, during my class, and after my class, which is all about like preparing for your university class too. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things, I have a nice slide, I'm not going to share it, but I always tell my students that you have at least in our program, you have about 3 hours a week in class. And that's not all you need to be doing. So you also need to be reading everything that's assigned in the textbook. Yes, they're actually mandatory. Sometimes you'll have required readings and supplementary readings. Required readings means it's part of the course. So I think of the course as having like 2 pieces, the textbook and the lectures, and they come together to form the whole. So you need to be doing the readings. You need to be, and it gets to be a lot, 5 classes, everybody has assigned 1 chapter. These aren't chapters like out of a novel, right? They get to be a bit heavy. So spacing yourself out, planning out when you're going to be in class, but also planning out what you're going to be doing for each of your classes throughout the week is really important. I know I book off, well, when I was in your shoes, I would book off time to read for each particular class, because otherwise you sort of scramble and go to class and don't necessarily know what the professor's talking about. Also having time to work on your assignments, right? So again, just because you have 3 hours in class doesn't mean that's the end of it. So you want to make sure that you've booked time to start doing any research, going to the library to finding out, getting those journal articles that you need to be reading, to be writing research papers or whatever it is you're doing.
I love that. That's perfect.
One more thing, sorry, I'm just thinking, you said before, during, and after class. And I also really advocate for note taking where you're not taking down every word. Spend most of your time listening, jot down a few things to remind you of the topic, and then as soon as the class is over, spend some time kind of fleshing out those notes. So if I gave an example about a police officer, you don't have to write down every single detail I said, just write example police, and then go and type it out or write it out for yourself. That's going to help you remember it and kind of solidify the information. It's more important that you go away from a class or a textbook understanding it than it is to memorize it. Especially in a program like mine, we don't have any formulas to memorize. You have to understand the material so that you can apply it later on.
Yeah, and that's a really big shift, I think, for a lot of new students from high school to university, where typically a lot of high school courses about memorization and just reproducing the information for a test or an exam, versus there's a huge shift in university closer towards like critical thinking and understanding material and applying it in a different way. So I think that's a really good tip when thinking about like taking notes in class. It might feel a little bit different for what you're aiming to do in a university class, which is cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want to talk about books because you mentioned textbooks at some point, or someone else did, and it's just like sticking in my head. And so I want to chat about the when and how to get books and materials, and whether you need to do that before university class. I'm going to put you on the spot, Prof. Howells, for like the when piece, but I'm also going to ask Joanna from the library to chat a little bit about some options from the library. I'm going to put Sammy, an upper year student, on the spot for where they might get their textbooks from, and I'll answer some pieces about the bookstore. But if it's okay with you, Prof. Howells, I'll ask you the first part of the question, which is, when should you get your books and materials?
Absolutely. I think you should wait until you have seen the syllabus or the course outline. Just because, maybe you know someone who took Soc 1500 with me last year or 3 years ago, and they might say, hey, you can use the book. I've actually switched textbooks, and that sometimes happens as we revamp our courses and our assignments. And so wait until you know what's expected of you, because that's part of the course. And if you're not reading the appropriately assigned material, that can mess up your tests, your exams, and your assignments. So wait, there will be time. The bookstore is really good about getting them. And often, for example, in my class, I have the textbook publisher coming to the first class where she's going to walk us through exactly how to register, how to download the ebook that I'm using. And then by the end of the class, you will have it sitting there on your computer. So wait a little bit.
I love that. Yes, especially because professors always tend to have more details about the books that you're buying. Sometimes a couple different options about where you could purchase that textbook or details, sometimes at a very different cost or expense. So I appreciate that as well. The University of Guelph has two main bookstores. So there's the campus bookstore and then there's the co-op bookstore as an option. Many students choose to buy their textbooks from there. But I also just want to share that there are other options as well. And because we have Sammy with us, I'm going to put Sammy on the spot for perhaps some of the options that Sammy has used, or that that fellow students have used. Sammy, I'm just going to put you on the spot and ask you for some tips and tricks to share with new students.
Sounds good. I hope I'm not lagging. My camera was cutting off there for a second. But in my first year and all throughout university, I was always looking for ways to buy used textbooks because buying new ones are quite pricey. So a website that I've always used is the Canon. So basically people that have taken courses before and have their textbooks left over, they'll list it on the Canon. And so if you see the one that you need for your course, you can choose to meet up with them. It's almost like Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace, but it's a bit safer because they're all U of G students and typically they'll ask to meet at the Canon.
I love it. I love that it's called the Cannon, first of all, which is an iconic piece of the U of G's campus, but it is an option. I know a lot of profs will share often in their first class a recommendation around just making sure that if you're buying these textbooks that you're buying the right edition for the class, or that it might have like an attached material to it. So for example, some textbooks come with like little key codes that can only be used once, and etc. So just always double check with your prof that it's where it's recommended to buy from and why before you go textbook hunting and trying to find the best priced textbook. And I'm also just going to toss it over to Joanna, because I know Joanna has some information about books on reserve in the library.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So another option that sometimes works is to get textbooks on reserve in the library. And some professors have editions of their textbook which are in the library, and you can go and you can check out a copy for, I believe it's going to be 4 hours maximum at a time. And so if, for example, you are short of funds at the beginning of the year and you're like, I need to wait a couple weeks before I purchase my textbooks, but I have readings that I have to do, you can use this option to do some of your readings. Or sometimes people will use the course reserves if they have a really big, heavy textbook and they like to keep it at home, but they're on campus for the full day and like have a block of 3 hours. They're like, wow, I'd love to read my textbook, but I don't want to bring something in that's really heavy. And so they'll go to the library, you just use your student card and you check it out. You do have to keep in mind a few things though. If you are late turning it in, you will get fined because there are lots of other students who want to use those textbooks. Also, if you're using the textbook a lot for your course, if it's a really foundational and fundamental to your learning in that course, I would just say be aware that you might want to invest in purchasing it, used or new, because if you are in a big class, chances are it's not just you who might want to check out the textbook from the library, but there might be other students as well. And if you think about it, like trying to check out a textbook the day before a midterm when there are several hundred students who also are interested in that textbook, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to check out the textbook. It might actually be gone. So it's a great option for you, but it's not like the very first thing I would recommend in terms of access to your textbooks. But it's a great option, and in addition to in-print textbooks, there also are often electronic copies on reserve as well. So you would find out more about that, again, when classes start, when you log onto CourseLink and you go to your first class.
Perfect, thank you so much, Joanna. And we're just going to circle back to some more questions for Prof. Howells. Well, we have Prof. Howells with us, and quite a few questions coming through the chat too, Prof. Howells, which I'm excited about. So I have another question, which is, how will someone know when assignments are due or a test is coming up? And I find this to be a really interesting question, Prof. Howells, because I know that you're going to mention this in the course outline, but I know folks are coming from a high school environment where a teacher often reminds them of an assignment being due or a test coming up quite regularly. So I'm just going to toss it back over to you to share a little bit more about how to know when assignments are due or when tests are coming and how to organize yourself that way.
Well, I have to say, Andrea, I'm glad that you said, I'm going to say it's in the syllabus. I have students who send me memes of it's in the syllabus. I want a shirt that says it's in the syllabus. And so that is my real, but also kind of jokey question. There's a few other things. So I use the calendar in CourseLink to remind students. Not all professors will do this. So it'll pop up, it'll say, hey, you've got something due that you maybe have forgotten about. I will also try to remind students, especially near the beginning of first year, because it's a lot. Everything gets a little bit overwhelming. Some of your professors won't though, and the ownership is really on you to remember. So I would take all of those syllabi that you printed off and have in front of you all of the time, and fill in your calendar with your Outlook. Maybe you use a Google Calendar, maybe you're old school with your beautiful day planner. You all have access to Outlook through the University of Guelph. You can put in all of your due dates and give yourself reminders for like a week or two in advance, and then a day in advance. These are all good things. Organization is really key. And I think that these are also skills that people learn over time, where you're like, I got it, I can handle all of this stuff. And you start to realize that as you add more classes and more, now you have clubs and you have practices and you want to hang out with your friends, you start to miss some things. So use whatever tools work best for you, whether that's paper or online. I think everybody has a cell phone. Set yourself some reminder apps or reminders in your apps, and stay on top of it. And if you need to look, go back to the syllabus.
I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, university really is an independent learning environment, and so that is part of the transition to university, in which it's really a time to start thinking about how you're going to organize yourself and be honest about organizing yourself and using your course outline from the beginning to plan out your entire semester, which we're going to touch base about in a few minutes with some thoughts from Joanna and upper year students. I also want to toss another question to you, Prof. Howells, which is, how do you engage in a class? And so I think this is around like a lot of like raising your hand or not raising your hand, asking questions, and etc. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this also depends on the course. So again, I'll speak to my own experiences. I try to run very interactive classes in both when I am in those beautiful Rosansky Hall building classrooms, or when I'm teaching you from my closet virtually. So I often give a lot of opportunity for students to engage either by using something, maybe you've used a clicker before, or Mentimeter, or Top Hat, or Learning Catalytics. These are all things you'll see your professors using throughout. I also often love it when students will put up their hand, but like, I get it. You're in a room of 600 people. I wouldn't have put up my hand when I was in your position. So you're certainly not expected to. But I think it's important for students to take those opportunities, because a lot of times, even if I ask an example question, I usually have 2 or 3 examples in my head already, but a lot of times you have something that's much more relevant or current, or it's a show I haven't had time to watch yet that, you know, you're drawing on the concepts. And so when you participate, it makes the class go faster for everyone. And so take those opportunities to engage, whatever they are. The more you put into the class, the more you're going to get out of it.
I love that. I mean, I do think that's really true, that the more you put in, the more you'll get out, whether that's doing your readings in advance, asking questions, engaging, making sure that you're note-taking in a way that makes sense without distractions, and so much more. I find that incredibly helpful. I do see a lot of questions in the chat about the difference between lectures, labs, and seminars, and what all that means. And so I know we shared like a little bit about that in a previous Start on Campus, but I'll share that typically a lecture is a larger gathering of students for a class. Sometimes it's the main component of a class, or sometimes that's all you might have for a course. Labs and seminars sometimes are like additions, like smaller group additions onto a course that has a main lecture component, and that just means that you get a chance to either interact with a smaller group of students or sometimes with a TA, or there might be asynchronous, like on your own time activities that you need to complete that are like under the title of a lab. And sometimes a course is just a seminar, meaning you are like a first year seminar, for example, where you meet with a smaller group, like a smaller group of students, and that's it. That's the whole course. It's very like one-on-one with a professor, because there might be a group of somewhere between 18 to 30 students in a seminar. So it's just a smaller learning environment, which is really neat. So you might see a mix of lectures, labs, and seminars on your course schedule. And another question that we have that came through the chat was, what about the ones that don't have specified like dates and times or locations, and what does that look like? We have a whole explanation on STARTonline.ca/academics. which explains what it means to have a online course that's synchronous, meaning there's a date and time assigned to it, and the meeting location is online, to have an in-person class that has a date and time and location on campus, to have a distance education class or a asynchronous online course, and meaning that there's assigned dates and deadlines within the course, but not a specific time that you need to attend a class live, and sometimes hybrid versions of all those things together. So you can read more about that on STARTonline.ca /academics, or if you want to continue asking questions in the chat about that, that works too. There is another follow-up question about who do I ask for help, and we are absolutely going to circle back to that in a moment with Joanna as well from the library, but I'm sure Prof. Howells has some thoughts about who to ask for help more generally when you're having challenges with academics.
I think I tell students, first, I think you should take a look at CourseLink in the syllabus, because sometimes the answer to your question is there. Then go ahead and ask a friend in the class or your TA. And if you still can't figure it out, or if it's directly related to course material, of course, come to your professor. We prefer not to have the questions of, do I have to read page 13 this week? Because we have, if you can imagine, I have 600 students in one of the 3 classes that I teach. I can't get to all of those little emails. So we hope that you'll seek out that information on your own. That being said, there's so many places on campus to ask for help when you have questions outside of direct course material. Your TAs and your professors can help you with that as well. There's, of course, wellness services. There's, all of the resources are linked on the is it STARTonCampus.ca? Do I have the right website?
STARTonline.ca.
STARTonline.ca, sorry. So there's a ton of places that you can seek out, but even just wandering around the campus, if you're on campus, sorry, Joanna, there's the Ask Us desk in the library. You can walk into almost any building and find signs for people that you can ask for help. And so take advantage of all of those resources, the things that are emailed to you, and use the people that you're starting to make connections with, because those connections are just going to build and you'll have more people you can turn to.
I love that. And thank you so much for your time, Prof. Howells. I know it is so meaningful to students who joined us live and are watching this as we're recording afterwards too, to hear from a real live human professor. It makes it so much more approachable and easy to know that professors at U of G are very friendly and happy to help. And one of the core reasons that you're there is to make sure that students succeed. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I just wanted to plug, sorry, Props Are People Too is an awesome thing I'm part of. We may get to chat later on. I'm also going to hang out for a little bit and answer some of these questions that are more directed to professors, but also feel free to reach out to me if any of you attending have any questions. I'm happy to help. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. And we're going to toss it over to Joanna next, because I know a lot of students are really curious about the transition from high school to university or whatever previous educational experience that you have in scheduling like a university student, quote unquote. So especially if you were in course enrollment, your schedule probably looks very empty in comparison to what your experience was like in high school. And I know Joanna wants to chat a little bit about time management, procrastination, studying effectively, and everything under that category. So I'm going to hand it off to you next, Joanna.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Prof. Howells. In the library, a lot of times people think of libraries and books, and we do have books in our library, but we also have a whole bunch of people who provide a lot of academic support. So, for example, if you're wondering, how do I make a schedule? How do I balance my time? I need to talk to somebody about that. We actually have people in the library that you can go to. So we are this next section of today's is a little bit, as Andrea said, about scheduling and how do you be a university student? What do you do? And the first thing I wanted to say was that we wanted to acknowledge that the past year has been really different. And particularly for those of you who have had quadmesters or octomesters last year, where you were just taking one class at a time or maybe 2 classes at a time. It is going to be really different going to 5 classes at a time. That might feel a little bit strange to you, and it's totally okay to be nervous about that. Sammy's going to jump in a minute or two to talk to you about some ways that she and other students have kind of managed their time and give you some examples. But I also wanted to say too that you have had a lot of strengths that I think you can use from this past year that are going to help a lot as you're thinking about your first year at university. So the past year, I think, has really meant a lot of independent learning for everyone in high school, and that is definitely going to prepare you for your work as a university student. I think also if you've gotten used to going onto Google Classrooms or whatever the system is from your high school in terms of knowing that you need to go on there, you need to check in, look for announcements, sort of think about how is that sort of online classroom structured and how is it going to help you learn. That is definitely a skill which is going to be really useful for you here at Guelph. Finally, I think too that if you have had the quadmesters or octomesters approach last year, you got used to figuring out how to learn within a pretty short time frame. And I think it was, for most of you, might have just been about 5 weeks per class. And so now when you go into the University of Guelph, our semester is 12 weeks of classes, plus another 2 weeks for final exams. And so you're going to be able to use those skills that you've had in terms of how do you study rather intensively, and you're going to be able to apply them next year. So those are some things to think about. But when you are thinking about, well, how do I go from 1 or 2 classes at a time to 5 classes at a time? Number one, there are lots of people around to help you. There's lots of support if you have questions. Also too, that this is something where I think you're just going to be thinking about the skills that you developed in grade 11 and grade 10 in terms of how do you deal with, in high school, 4 classes at a time. Now it's going to be 5. It's also really important to think about what your priorities are as a student. And we wanted to say it's okay to say no. Maybe first think about what is it that you really want to get out of this year? What are the classes that you're really thinking about? What are sort of the extracurriculars that you might want to really be involved with? And then think about, okay, if you need to say no to some things, how can you do that and what makes sense to you? So it's definitely something that requires personal reflection, but it's something that I think all students, even sort of pre-pandemic, had to think about in terms of prioritizing and deciding what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it. I do want to mention that a few students do decide to go from 5 courses to fewer courses. If that is something that you want to consider, number one thing is talk to your program counselor. So I think you've had some information in some of these Start Online events and also on STARTonline.ca about program counselors, but you definitely want to talk to them to see about what happens if you went from 5 courses to 4. How would that affect your progression through your program, and what does that mean? But we did want to mention that as an option for a few people because sometimes that question comes up. I think now we're going to turn it over to Sammy, who's going to talk from her perspective as a U of G grad and a recent student about how she managed her time, and she'll share that with you.
Hi again. So as the fall semester is quickly approaching, it's never too early to look ahead and start preparing for your university experience at Guelph. The new semester is going to pick up quickly, so being prepared will minimize a lot of potential stress you may have. To begin, you should start preparing for a hectic schedule of classes, due dates, assignments, and exams by adjusting time in your schedule for school. Starting classes right on day 1 and mentally preparing for the busy nature of university. You should also prepare by taking the first the few weeks left before school to learn about university resources such as CourseLink. You can start by using CourseLink as a base schedule to see when and where your classes are, so you know how much time to allocate for travel and to attend each class. Once the semester begins, you'll be able to find your course syllabus for each class on CourseLink. So there you'll find important due dates, assignments, and it can provide you with a general overview of how your semester is going to go. From there, I recommend using a tool to visually see your entire semester. So for example, before the start of each of my semester, regardless of first year or other years, I would use Apple calendars because it would sync with my computer and my phone. And I'd write down each due date from each of my syllabus right at the beginning. So this would include everything from a 1% weighted quiz to a final exam, and I'd make sure that the calendar is super updated all throughout the semester. That way there were no surprises during the semester. Of course, you don't have to use Apple calendars. I had a lot of friends use physical agendas or hang a giant calendar on the wall. I know people who use Outlook calendars, to-do lists, and there's just a lot of apps and softwares out there. It's really up to you how you want to stay organized. Moving on, talking about what a day could look like. In university, there's a lot of balance involved to ensure you lead a healthy lifestyle. So this would include a mix between academics, eating properly, breaks, exercise, and socials. Of course, everyone's day-to-day schedule is going to look super different due to your personal class schedules and preferences. But personally, in my first year, I lived in self-residence, and I had a schedule where I attended class every day, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, some at night. Depending on the day, I had a mix. But personally, I'm a night person. So in a typical day for me, I'd wake up before my first morning class, eat a quick breakfast, and then head to my first class. I usually make time to study in between my classes at the library during the day, leave time for lunch, and then on days I didn't have a 7 p.m. lecture, I'd try and go to the gym for an hour and eat dinner when I came back to residence. Usually at night, I made some time to hang out with my roommates, and if I didn't have a morning class the next day, I'd study into the night and wake up at a later time. There really isn't a right or wrong way to do this as long as all your needs are taken care of.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sammy. And because we're talking about schedules, I want to jump and chat about what a weekly schedule will look like for everybody. What works for your classmates might not work for you. That's completely okay. Everyone organizes differently. Everyone's week looks differently. You'll also likely find that throughout your first year, you'll find what strategies do and do not work for you. That might be similar to what worked for you in high school. It might be very different. That could be dependent on other commitments you have, how heavy your courses are, or even what components your courses consist of. So I know that students, even when I was in university, and I'm still in university, I'm about to go back to school again in the fall, which I'm very excited about. I find new strategies that work for me all the time, and I try out new things. Some things continue to work, some things I find are best improved on because they weren't really doing what I need them to do, but typically, a weekly schedule includes time for independent study, writing assignments, completing course readings, preparing for exams. Our rule of thumb that we recommend is that for every hour you spend in class, you should plan for between 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 hours of extra time outside of the class for studying, reviewing, taking notes, working on assignments, and more. And I'm just going to share my screen for a second here, just so I can scroll down on STARTonline.ca/academics and show you that we have some example schedules available for you. So we have Norman and Tiana's schedules on here to show you what a typical university weekly schedule might look like. And you'll see that they have some time that's allocated for their actual classes. For example, Tiana on here has Biology 1070, and then a Biology 1070 seminar right afterwards. And you see that Tiana has some space allocated for going over notes and studying every single day for those. Plus everything else that's in Tiana's schedule, like self-care, volunteering, work, they're in the wildlife club, etc. And these are real upper year student schedules, they recreated what their first year schedule looked like, and Norman's is on there as well. On STARTonline.ca, you'll also see that there's a explanation of what a year looks like as well. And so if you scroll all the way down, there's a what does a year in the life of a student look like? So you can read ahead and see what you can expect month by month as a university student. So typically September, that's when your classes begin. You're going to be able to view your course outlines on CourseLink, any materials you need to purchase, and then throughout September you can drop courses, add courses, and change your schedule. You can add courses up until September 17th, I believe, off the top of my head, but you can drop courses at any time. October is normally when midterms start happening. Those are larger tests or assignments for your courses. Those are very common in October. Thanksgiving happens in October in Ontario, Canada. November is often when those midterm grades are released. It's also when some students tend to get burned out a little bit, so really important to start prioritizing or continue prioritizing self-care before you head into exams. And that's typically when you start getting ready for exams, which are in December, when you receive your final exam schedule and you write your exams. So there's lots of more information on here if you want to take a look at what your schedule might look like for the entire semester, because we encourage you to use your course outline to plan out not just a week at a glance, but also your entire semester ahead of time so you don't miss any due dates, deadlines. For example, if you have an assignment in week 5, you'll want to start preparing for that assignment way before week 5. So I encourage you to use your course outline to not just prepare for what your week looks like, but your entire semester. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here and flip back to myself. And so now that you know what your semester might look like, because I encourage you to look on Web Advisor for your weekly schedule when you get your course outline in September, to take that with your weekly schedule and kind of figure out what your whole semester looks like. I also want to talk about where you'll be doing your actual work, because that's a really important conversation to have too. So I'm going to toss it over to Sammy to talk about setting up your workspace, life space, study space, all the things.
Hi. So your study workspace might look different depending on where you are, whether it be in residence, off-campus housing in Guelph, or the house that you commute from. But no matter where you are, you should start thinking about setting up a space to do schoolwork. So you can think about what environment you need to be productive. Some students choose to study on campus to avoid distractions from their housemates or bedroom. There's a lot of options, such as being at the library or studying in a building where your classes take place. If you choose to study at your house or residence, think about potential distractions and how you can eliminate them. So this can include cleaning up a messy desk or equipping your workspace with everything you need so you don't have to constantly leave. In my first year, I lived in residence, and I would typically study in my room at night after my roommate's gone to bed, but I usually would study at the library or somewhere on campus between my classes or during the day. When I lived off campus, however, I was able to study in my own room more since I had my own space, but I would still study on campus or in the common areas of my house just for a change of scenery. No matter where your primary study space is, it's important that you set it up with everything you need for class. And so it's important that if you're working remotely or have virtual components to your classes, that your study space is distraction-free, productive, and comfortable. So when I wasn't studying in the library, I studied in my room, and I would never study in bed because it would always hurt my back and I'd be tempted to take a nap. So I spent a lot of time at my desk. Some of my must-haves were definitely headsets or earbuds, a water bottle, and a mouse and keyboard. But I also connected a second monitor to my laptop so I can have multiple things open at once, which was especially useful for online classes.
Hi everyone, my name's Paige and I use she and her pronouns. And just to add on to Sammy's experience, I also lived in South Residence during my first year, and one of my favorite study spaces was actually the athletic center. So there's a sneaky spot in the second floor of the lounge there that I use to study very often, and I always like to separate my personal time, so meaning my bedroom or my residence room, from my study space. I just think it really helped myself getting into the right headspace. I'd take my water, sometimes a snack, and my headphones to get in the zone, and would always block off time in my calendar as well to study, either in between classes. And I'm a bit more of a morning person now, so I usually like to study earlier during the day because that's when I'm most productive. So I find that during your first year, you'll especially figure out what time of learning is most beneficial for you. A lot of people study better at night than they do in the morning. So that's something that you'll learn throughout your first semester as well. And I'm going to pass it back to Andrea now.
I was muted, sorry. So with working from home or a space where you also live, also comes the challenge of working in a shared space. So this can be challenging, especially if you don't have a space that is quiet or private. It can be even more challenging when you're sharing that space with roommates or family members. So I just wanted to share some tips or tricks you can use when setting up boundaries with folks that you might be in a shared living space with. And the first one is consider making a roommate agreement or having a conversation with the folks that you'll be sharing a living space with. So this could include sharing or being transparent, what your schedules look like, busy times in your semester, how you plan to respect each other's space, or what you need in order to be productive in your space, and how you'd like to solve conflicts as they arise. So if you're going to be living in residence or living off campus in Guelph and have roommates or housemates, it's really important when making those agreements that everyone feels heard and respected, and that one person's needs aren't more important than the others, but that we try to figure out something that works for everyone. So you can connect with the off-campus living office or residence staff to kickstart those conversations or get help in how to make those conversations. They have documents and tips and tricks for how to have roommate and housemate conversations and agreements. And Sammy, I know you have an example of a roommate agreement that you made.
Yeah, so I find having a discussion with your roommates before the semester starts, it's really important. In my first year, I had an agreement with my roommates because she was a morning person, but I was not. So we had to coordinate some study times and noises at night.
I love that. Thank you, Sammy. And I mean, you're talking about studying, which I think is fantastic, but another tip that I have to think about is also thinking about what private space you might need for advising appointments or counseling, which can be anywhere you are comfortable sharing personal information, but everyone's different, and I think that's really critical to think about what that would look like for you. So for example, if you know that you need private space for any reason and you have a roommate, for example, having a really transparent conversation around alone time or private time in a shared space can be really important. Another tip that I have is set working hours and have honest conversations about your needs. So for example, setting yourself studying hours will help you set boundaries with your own time. For example, I treat school like a job because it is a lot of hard work. I complete schoolwork within a set amount of hours with scheduled breaks. This helps me stay on track and keep a certain amount of time free for myself and other commitments that I have in my life. And having really open and honest conversations with people who support me, people who I share a living space with, about what I need to need, and do in order to be successful is really necessary. And the last tip I have is to actually change up your study space where possible. And I know Sammy wants to share some examples about this, so I'm just going to toss it back to Sammy.
So I found it really important to have different study spots, whether it be on campus or in your own home, just because you might get bored or get distracted if you're just sitting in one spot for too long. So in my first year, I found a few different places I typically like to go. So I'd be in the library pretty often, but there are different floors on the library. Some were quiet study floors and others were group study floors. So on some days I'd go find a little cubicle desk and study by myself, or other times I'd have some friends with me and we'd go to a group study floor. There's also study rooms in the library, which sometimes my friends and I would rent out if we had to grind really hard for an exam. Or I also study in Thornborough, which is the engineering building. On the first floor, there's plenty of desks and there's big windows at the front. So that was another place I like to sit.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sammy. And I know that my next tip is also something that I would like Joanna to share herself, but really it is to engage the resources that you have at the University of Guelph for your learning. And so we just want to chat briefly about the resources available to you as a new student for university learning. And Joanna's just going to chat a little bit about what you can look for and what's available through the library.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So there's been a lot of great advice about lots of different things to think about as you start at the university. And so when you are a student here, and if you are looking for more support, Prof. Howells had some great suggestions about thinking about whether you're looking for content support, go to your TA or your professor, talk to your classmates or roommates. But I also wanted to mention some things at the library. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen of just the library homepage real quickly and point out a few key things to you. Okay, so on the library homepage, right on the first page, we have a bunch of really helpful things. So one thing, one support that we have at the university through the library are supported learning groups. These are facilitated study sessions led by senior students, and they're in certain courses, like Chemistry 1040 is one. They're in some math and physics courses in first year, psychology. So they're not in every course, but they're in some. It's 3 hours of study time with other students. They will be online at the start of the semester, and you will get information in your classes about how you join one. But they're great opportunities to review information in your classes and meet other students in a small group setting. So definitely recommend those. Some other things that we have in the library to support you academically we have appointments, and so you'll see this icon here which says book online appointments. So you can book appointments with senior students or with staff about things like writing your essay. So you can bring in a rough draft of your essay and get feedback on it. If you're not even sure where to begin on an essay that you're writing or a lab report, you can get some helpful advice on how to do that. If you are, let's say, really struggling with procrastinating, and you're like, I have all this work to do, I try to get started and I just can't, you can book an appointment with somebody and talk about strategies for reducing your procrastination and sort of increasing your motivation to do your schoolwork. Other things too are appointments on research skills, if you need to do a research report. Different ways to study, especially if you have a lot of online classes and you feel like you're doing lots of sitting in front of a computer. We can help you with sort of some ways to change it up. And another resource that I like to mention is not an in-person resource. It's just our MARC calculator, which is simply a calculator that will help you keep track of your marks in your courses. You can use it, plug in your marks, and it'll kind of tell you based on the information that you have so far, like let's say midway through the semester, what type of final mark you can expect to receive based on what you have so far, or you can compute like what type of mark you would like to receive on your final exam in order to receive a final mark that's in the range that you're looking for. So it's just kind of a neat tool for you to use. Also in the library, we have lots of just resources on studying and learning. So if you just want to print out like a 7-day calendar to plot out your time, you can do that. And lots of helpful information there, things like APA formatting, if you have to write a research paper in a specific style. So those are just a few things from the library. So you can visit us online right now or come by in person.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And so we've talked a lot about Orientation Week. I'm sure you saw it in the email this week, but I also wanted to share that Orientation Week and your classes do happen at the same time. So you start classes on the Thursday and Friday of Orientation Week. Orientation Week is often thought of as like a really social thing, and it really is. It's a great opportunity to meet fellow students, get involved, and etc. But Orientation Week is also a resource in itself, because you have the opportunity to figure out and find where all your classes are, because there's tours being given, there's upper year volunteers who are ready, willing, and able to help you figure out how to navigate campus. And also there are academic sessions that happen during Orientation Week, including meetings for majors, which is a really helpful session to make sure that you get information related specific to your major. So I just wanted to share that Orientation Week is a resource in itself and a really good kickoff to starting in your first few days of classes. The last thing that we want to share with you and Start on Campus today is some information about tech and the tech we use at the U of G. And so right from the get-go, I assume if you've managed to get to this Teams Live that you have logged into your U of G email, which is fantastic. Now is the time to start getting into the habit of checking your email daily, setting up your calendar, figuring out how to click into CourseLink and other platforms, but to really start creating those habits, because part of your homework, your independent homework as a university student, is creating those habits. It is checking. So checking your email, checking CourseLink, checking any notifications that you've received. And so I want to chat a little bit about CourseLink and just how you can log in, Zoom and Teams. So we have some common platforms used by the university, and two of those are Teams and Zoom. But when we talk about your base platform for everything, we're talking about CourseLink. So I'm just going to hand that over to Carolyn first, so that Carolyn can just share with us how to log into CourseLink.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrea. So we're going to dive right into CourseLink. I have my screen share set up, and right now I'm just sitting on the University of Guelph website. So one of the ways you can log into CourseLink is from that student, faculty, and staff login. So that's the fourth option down on the left-hand navigation. I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to be asked for my University of Guelph credentials. I have mine auto-loaded, but you may type yours in, and I'll sign in. And it brings me to what we call the intranet for the university. So this is likely where you've already accessed your webmail, you've already been into WebAdvisor, signing up for your courses. Where we're going to go today is CourseLink. So CourseLink itself can also be accessed by putting in courselink.uoguelph.ca. That's the web address. It will take you right to this site. And then what you're going to do is you are going to use this lovely orange login button. You'll notice there's a visitor login. That's for some other accounts, but because you are a University of Guelph student, you'll be clicking here. I'm already signed in. I've already authenticated on the university system, so I come right into CourseLink. You can actually already do this right now. You just may not be able to access your courses. You're more likely going to see courses where the icons look grayed out, and it'll say something. This one says it ended July 9th. Your courses will say when they're starting, and that's going to be your indication on the first day that you'll be able to go into your CourseLink sites. But I have a number of courses that are made available. I can have all of the courses. I can sort by semester. We're moving into fall 2021. I can talk. And go to fall. And I have my all about CourseLink for fall 21 site. So we're going to actually spend some more time tomorrow afternoon in the All About Course Link section, diving into this course a little bit more and helping you to find where you find that course outline. Where do you find the calendar that Prof. Howells was talking about? Are there announcements? There was a lot to talk about discussions I saw in the Q&A. We're going to go over all of those features tomorrow, so I really hope you can join, and if not, there will be a recording made available. One thing that does come up with CourseLink quite often is how often should you be logging in? Certainly with remote learning, you're probably going to be coming in a lot more often. But if you are somebody who, you have lots of responsibilities, you're not taking a lot of courses that are running remotely or via distance education, make sure you're coming in at least a couple times a week. Your professors and instructors and TAs are likely leaving announcements for you to help keep you on track and moving forward with your courses. So it's a really great repository for all that information. While we're here, the other tool that I'm going to talk about is Zoom. Zoom has been a very popular web conferencing option for the live delivery of virtual or remote lectures. One thing that you can do to start preparing for this is creating a Zoom account with your University of Guelph credentials. We have a resource that helps walk you through all the steps, and once I'm done my screen share, I'll pop the link in the chat so you can have it. But if you have a course that's being delivered via Zoom, we strongly recommend that you get a Zoom account with your University of Guelph email because it may be required to enter the meeting. It may allow you to bypass the waiting room. It'll place you into any breakout rooms that you're in correctly, allow you access to cloud recordings, and it also allows the instructor to capture your student participation in those classes. So it's a really important feature. So I'll pop that in the chat, and at this point I will pass it back to Andrea to talk about Teams.
Perfect, thank you so much. Okay, so for us, Teams is something that you've likely already been on. So I'm just going to screen share and show what Teams looks like if you haven't yet been on there. But I posted as an announcement in the chat. And you'll see that there's a link to both how to get to Teams, which is on STARTonline.ca/social, and how to begin with Zoom, which is a resource on OpenEd. So you can click either of those links to get to either of those resources. Teams looks like this. So you are automatically already a part of a group on Teams, and that is called Start at U of G 2021 to 2022. And so you can connect with your fellow students already in Teams, and your profs in the fall might also use Teams for your classes. And so if you want to check out what that looks like for the fall, I recommend logging in now because you're already a part of something. And it's a great way to meet students over the summer to see what that looks like, and also just to chat and connect with other incoming students and upper year students with any questions that you might have to hear directly from their experience and tips and advice. And to wrap us up, we're going to hear from Zhao from Information Security, who's going to talk about everything that you need to know about being cyber secure on campus. And a common FAQ for a lot of students is really where you can get help and what you need to know as a university student around tech. So if you're seeking help with educational tools, you can seek help from CourseLink, and we're going to put some information in there. But Zhao is going to share more about information security.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I am João Bernardo, working as an analyst for the information security team in CCS. So I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through. I'll try to make it quick. I know we're running short on time, so let me go through that. Okay, so I usually start with a security quiz. I'll try to go through it, maybe try to think of what you think these numbers are as I go through this statistics. So how many email messages are sent to the University of Guelph on an average day? It's 2.3 million was the stat that we had for 2020 for one day. Of that number, what percentage is blocked due to spam, viruses, or other malicious indicators? 95%. So only 100,000 per day are clean, which leaves 800 million suspicious email messages that we received in 2020. On average, how many systems connect to the campus network every day? 12,000 wired connections and 28,000 wireless connections. That includes phones, laptops, things like that. What is the average number of events per second that our Security Information Event Management System receives, or SIM for short? It receives 2,268 events per second, which is around 200 million events per day. How many cloud-based services have been observed on the U of G network? It's more than 1,800 services. Next, I'll talk about why universities are a common target for hackers. It boils down to the fact that we tend to have very valuable information, things like financial, student records, staff data, intellectual property, like research data or teaching materials. And the matter of the fact is that universities are an easy target. As you can see here on my slide, it's showing you a bunch of headlines from different universities around the world and times that they were hacked or compromised. University is a decentralized environment, which is a challenge for security. We have less control. We do have managed desktop and web services, but those are optional, and most departments have their own IT. On top of that, we have a heterogeneous environment, which basically means everyone brings their own device. You have your own cell phone, your own laptops. So it just makes it very easy for hackers to get into our environment. Here's a clip of an attack map that we have in our office on campus. It just illustrates just how many events that we have going into campus. You can see the little griffin there where Guelph is, and all those lines are different computers around the world connecting to the university. Most of them bad, as you can see the red little circles there under that chart shows blocked connections. We don't have very many allowed because most of them are malicious. All right, common security themes. This is a list of security themes that come up often and are very important. I'll only be going over passwords and phishing today. Not to say the other ones are not important, they are as well. It's just those top two are most relevant to students. First, I'll let you see what our security website looks like. We do have blog posts that we post regularly. And here you'll be able to find a button for changing your password, reporting an incident, any contact information, and other security policies that we have on campus. So a good password practice is as soon as you get your password, I know it's very tempting to keep it the same, but you should change your password as soon as you get it, and then at least annually. Never use your university password for anything else. Don't write it down, don't share it. And consider using a passphrase as well, which is a very long password that is made up of many words. You could try to throw symbols and numbers in there as well. They're much easier to remember, and you should make it so that nobody can guess it if they know who you are. You should use a password manager. It improves your personal security by allowing you to have stronger passwords. And it makes your life easier. You don't have to remember any of your passwords, and a lot of them allow you to just change your passwords in bulk when it comes time to that. Phishing. So phishing is basically trying to obtain sensitive information by disguising a request to make it look like it's something legitimate. You can see in this chart here, we have those are the numbers of automatically blocked emails per month there, which is pretty high in the millions. And here's an example of a phishing message that you might receive. The first thing you will note, or you should look at, is where it's coming from. You should always verify the sender and the reply to email address. As you can see here, this is not coming from the help center, although it looks like it might. it's coming from an @mail.com address, which is not at uguelph.ca. As well, you should hover over links and see where they're actually going to, because you could change what a hyperlink looks like. You should always check just to make sure before you click on a link. So you should always pay close attention to the sender and the reply to email address, any links and signatures. Phishing messages will often be very urgent and make you feel like you have to do something in order for another thing to work. The university will never put you in a situation where you have to make a decision right away, or there's going to be dire consequences. Just always exercise care and diligence with attachments as well, as they can be very dangerous. One note I'd like to say as well, just minimize the amount of personal items you use in your U of Guelph account as well for your email. So try not to sign up for personal things like Netflix or Spotify. You don't get to keep your account after you graduate. So it's better to keep those on a personal account just so you don't lose anything once you're done with your university email. Here is a screenshot of the Student Cybersecurity Awareness course that we've just set up. It's brand new. We're using a new site now that gives you an actual risk score, which could be kind of fun to compare with your friends. You can find it under the resources tab. I've circled it there very crudely in red for you. I'd also like to plug, as a last little bit, the Cybersecurity Awareness Roadshow, which is just takes place the entire month of October. We have lots of prizes for all the activities, live events, a Capture the Flag site, and a cybersecurity virtual escape room for you guys to participate in. More information will be provided as October approaches. Here's some contact information for us. You can go to ithelp@uguelph.ca for general IT queries, phishing, or issues, and any security-specific questions can be sent directly to incident@uguelph.ca. With that, I'm done my presentation, and any questions that you may have for me can be sent to incident@uguelph.ca.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate having you all join us today. I know that there's a lot of information shared, and so if you have any questions, we're going to hang out in the chat for a few more minutes. But if you have a question that doesn't get answered fully, or perhaps you think of a follow-up question or more questions later, just know that you can email us at start@uguelph.ca, and we'd be happy to connect you with anyone who spoke today. And I did want to remind you that in your U of G email, which is likely how you found the link for the Start on Campus today, there are also 3 other sessions happening this week. And one of them is hosted by Student Accessibility Services right now at 3:30. So if you're a student who is interested in connecting with Student Accessibility Services, I recommend that you hop off this Start on Campus and go attend there. But if you're interested in any of the sessions happening later in the week, which include tips and tricks from distance education and all about Course Link, you can find those links directly in your U of G email. Past that, thank you so much for coming out to Start on Campus. You can always find the recording if you missed any part of this, or want to make sure that you watch it back for any reason. All of the recordings are posted within 24 hours on STARTonline.ca/events. And so I'm just going to mute myself and make sure that we get all of our questions answered before we head out of here. We're going to end the live in just a few moments. But you're always welcome to email us at start@uguelph.ca. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Wonderful. It looks like we've answered all the questions, so we are going to wrap up the live there. I think the answer to the final question is being shared right now. So thank you so much for coming out. And if you have any other further questions or a question didn't get answered in a way that makes you have a ton more questions, just email us at start@uguelph.ca. We'd be happy to share more from there. Take care.